Right, okay, guys. So I thought I'd do a video on this because I've recently been doing videos about, physical media making a comeback and DVD is king and various things like that. But I haven't really done much in the way of like a deep conversation about retro gaming. So I thought I'd go over that because, as you've seen by the title, why do I love retro gaming? Well, there's a lot of reasons really, but I thought we'd go through them. So my first point would be the obvious one for everyone. I would have thought would be nostalgia. Yes, absolutely. Nostalgia is definitely. I've said it many times before. Nostalgia is a powerful drug. Once it gets you, it's hard to get away from it, and as a result, you can end up buying mountains of stuff down to this. In some ways, it could probably be a curse, I suppose, to some people. Um, but yes, nostalgia is definitely one of the driving forces, if not the main driving force. It's a reminder of better times, isn't it? In a lot of cases, it's normally a reminder of when you was a kid, when life was a bit simpler, when basically all you had to worry about really was going to school, maybe going out doing your paper round after school, and then getting home for some good old sessions of gaming. So a good example would be right there. That's the nostalgia. You get that warm sort of feeling when you look back on a game that you had back in the day, or when, for example, in my case, when I reacquired a Commodore 64 and when I reacquired the Mega Drive, which were my first computer and my first games console back in the day. When I re-got them, it was, I can't really describe it, but it gave me a very warm feeling when I got them, because that's special then. You're like, you're retreading the same ground, but a lot later. And the difference is now you're older, you're that bit more mature, and you now understand the gravity of the situation, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense. You now look at it with a different light, a fondness, a realization that those were special times, even if you didn't notice it at the time back then. So, yeah, so that's my first point, nostalgia. Number two, it was all new back then, fresh ideas that hadn't been done before, and we were spoilt for choice. And we was like, this is the thing. I mean, when I grew up, I was born 1978, so I grew up literally through the golden age of gaming, if you like. And like I say, it was all new. This hadn't been done before. So what we were seeing, it was the first time round. It was special times. And when you saw, for example, when you saw things like Space Invaders or Pac-Man, you'd never seen anything like it before, and so as a result, it was very different to anything else. And you again, it goes back to the nostalgia. You're going to have a nostalgia for that later on because you understand that that was a special time. And I've even said before, I also think that's probably the golden age of film as well, because again, there was a lot of things being done back then that hadn't been done before. The 80s and 90s was a very creative time, and there was a lot of changes happening to movies, and as a result, that then spilled over into gaming. Because let's not forget, some of these games were based on films, not always good games, I must admit, but there were a few that were. So yeah, it was all new. It hadn't been done before, and so as a result, when I look back on that now, it's like, yeah, see, these games were great. And in fact, I'd still say that what they'd done then is still special because we've moved a long way from that in current gaming now. Modern gaming is very different. Number three, it was simpler. Yes. Now you've heard me say this before. I prefer simpler times. I do. For example, here's a good example, right? So nowadays you put a game in and you've got to wait 45 minutes for a patch to download because the game you just bought is broken. Which quite often is the case, or maybe not even finished. That's the other thing, Back then, if you had a console, you literally plugged and played. You just put the cartridge in, you turned it on, bang, you're playing, There weren't even any loading times because cartridge was quick, However, of course, then you had micros, the flip side of that. Yes, if you had a Commodore 64, Spectrum, Amstrad, and various other microcomputers at the time, yes, you had loading times. You had to put a tape in or a disc in, and you had to load it. But back then we used to complain about such things. When game consoles come around, it was like, oh wow, you're saying I can put this in, turn it on, and the game's there, and then wow, I've not got to wait 10 minutes for a tape to load. This is amazing. To us it was like witchcraft. But the point is that actually when you look back on it now, like I do now, yeah, we used to moan about a 10-minute loading time for a tape, but I'd argue that that is less time than you now wait when you put a modern game into a PS4, PS5, Xbox, whatever, because you've got to get a patch download or the actual game download to your system, because it's not really even on the disc in the first place. So, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like, we've actually gone backwards with this stuff, really, when you think about it. Give me back them 10-minute loading times any day. I'd rather have that. And so, again, this is another reason why people like me, gravitate back to retro gaming, because quite frankly, it was better. Number 4, couch co-op. Now, this is a big one for me, because back then, you used to sit on the sofa with your mates and you'd play a game, and I did this frequently. I remember, for example, one of my best memories, Micro Machines, sitting there with 8 of my mates, and we was all having a competition on who was the best, basically, And the good thing was on some of them Micro Machines games, you could put 4 controllers in, so you could play 4-player. It was great, and that's lost now, isn't it? Because, well, everything you can play multiplayer now, but you're not in the same room, are you? No, you're not. In fact, you're not even in the same building. And in fact, in some cases, you're not even in the same country. Yes, this is the problem, I think, like one of the major problems. And don't get me wrong, I've played online, I'm not a stranger to this, I've done it, but you can't beat couch co-op, you really can't, And I'll speak from experience here, because like I say, I've done it myself, but also I've got 2 young boys, and one of them in particular, my God, all I hear from him is him sitting in his room screaming down his headset, There was none of that back in the day. The only thing that my parents might have moaned about was how loud we had the TV up, And in most cases, most of us played in our rooms anyway, so it didn't really matter. So this is the other thing, It's there's a social aspect that's been lost to gaming, It's funny because I hear on the news and things nowadays how, oh yeah, a lot of problems of today is that kids don't know how to socialise. Well, yeah, whose fault's that? I mean, a lot of that's been caused by, for example, modern gaming. Because back in the day, that weren't a problem. Because you had to go around your mates, or your mate had to come round to you to play the game. So you still socialised, that's the point. You was in the same room, You understood things like body language and facial cues because you was in the room with that person. You can't do that when you're playing a modern game in your bedroom, can you? No, because you can't even see that person in most cases. So there you go. Number 5. With each generation, you saw a jump. It was worth getting the next generation. I really can't say the same now, and I can't. Like, this is the thing. When you went from, say, a Master System to a Mega Drive, or you went from, say, an NES to a Super Nintendo, my God, you could see the jump. 8-bit to 16-bit was a massive leap. But going even further than that, if you look at the leap from Mega Drive to Saturn, or the SNES to, for example, let's not use a Nintendo example. Let's say the SNES to the PlayStation. Look at the jump there. And again, it had doubled, hadn't it? It had gone from a 16-bit to a 32-bit. You could see the leap in technology. And so as a result, we love them games. And like I say, it comes back to the nostalgia thing again. This is why we have a lot of nostalgia for these games, because we could see the leaps in technology, and that made it very special, a very special time. If you look now, there's not much difference between a PS4 and a PS5, is there? Not really. Not like there was back then. There's nowhere near the massive leaps you saw back then. In fact, there's not really a massive difference between PS5 and PS3, really. I mean, people are going to argue in the comments. I know they are. They're going to go, yeah, there is a difference. There is, but not as big as it was back then. When you went from an NES to a SNES, my God, there was a massive difference. Massive difference. Not like you're seeing now. Yes, there are differences. The graphics are slightly nicer. The sound slightly better. But come on, when you looked at a blocky 8-bit game and then you looked at a smooth-edged 16-bit game, there was a big difference. You know, colours, for example, was a massive difference. You could really see it. So we move on to our next point, number 6. Everything now is a reboot, a remaster, and then of course you got the woke DEI garbage that they put into these things. You know, back then, and this sort of goes back to my other point with number 2. You know, number 2, I said it was all new back then, yeah. And this is the thing, like, it's not now, because it's all a reboot, a remaster. You know, they're just copying things they've done already. I can't count how many PS3 games got remastered to the PS4. And you're now seeing the same with PS4 to PS5. You know, guys, get an imagination, come up with an original idea, and stop rehashing the same crap. Do something new, yeah? This is why people like me prefer the older stuff, because we're fed up you keep serving up the same crap over and over again. I don't care if you've HD'd it. I really don't. I want something original, yeah? Of course, like I say, going back to the older stuff, which, like I said, refers to my second point on this list, was that it was all new back then. And so when I go back to these old games, I'm playing something that was very special back then. You know, it only came once. And of course, you had people that would imitate games. You know, for example, Pac-Man back in the day had a lot of clones. It did, but they were also different. They had little subtle differences to the original Pac-Man. You know, so this is the thing, it was still original in its own little way. It wasn't like now where it's exactly the same game with a new lick of paint, you know? It was different in some sort of way. But of course, like I say, the woke garbage that's being put into these modern games, you know how I feel about woke stuff on this channel, guys. Woke stuff, DEI, you can shove it. You can shove it right up your ass. I'm not interested. You know, it's all pandering. None of you companies actually mean any of this crap. You're just doing it because you think that you're appealing to another market, which don't exist. You know, this market doesn't exist. These people with their purple hair, they're not buying your games. You know, you're wasting your time. And so what happens then is people like me who are actually gamers, well, that puts us off and we don't want to play your games then. You know, good example right now, Ubisoft. I'm not interested in buying anything that they produce. And this is the point. I love my retro gaming. I do actually buy modern games too. Not as much as I used to. Because like I say, because of this crap. But I do buy them. However, I won't be buying Ubisoft games anymore because they're not very nice people, are they? And again, this comes back to all this woke DEI crap. I'm not going to go into it. You guys probably already know what I'm talking about here. You know, the latest Assassin's Creed is a good example, you know. You read up on that and all the crap that's going on there. Yeah, quite frankly, I think what you're doing is offensive to the Japanese people. And so as a result, I don't want to buy your stuff. And this is the point. You didn't get this with the stuff back in the day. No. Because people understood back then that if you want people to buy your games, you had to be nice to them. Because they're your fans. They're your customers. You know, you do something that they want to play. You know. And so again, I'm quite happy to go back to my old stuff and ignore all this modern politics, woke DEI garbage. Anyway, moving on. My last point. Point number 7. It's all physical. Yes, guys, you've heard me say this many times before. Normally, when I'm talking about movies, when I'm talking about film. Yes, it was all physical back then. It wasn't digital. Basically, you didn't have to put up with what they were trying to push down your throat, you know? You bought a game and it was yours. You know, you owned it. But now you don't, do you? You know, and this goes back to what I've been saying recently about having a physical film collection, you know. They can take these from you at any time. They can even change them at any time. And as a result, what they also can do is keep selling you the same bloody game over and over again, you know. Right now, we're seeing it with a Switch. You know, like, for example, like, if you go onto their digital platform right now, you can download, you know, games from the N64 and various other consoles. But the point is, like, if you've still got your retro gaming, you don't need to, do you? You've already got it. You know, so what you're seeing now is, and it's happening right across the board, they're selling you the same games over and over again. So now they're getting even lazier, you know. Now they're not even rebooting or remastering. No, they're just selling you the same digital file over and over again. And to be quite honest, yeah, if you only want a digital file, really, retro gaming's the answer, because you can download most ROMs to most emulation devices. And if you are paying for them, you're only paying for them once, you know. So this is another part of what I'm saying here, you know. Physical is always the answer, in my opinion, and this is why I always prefer the retro stuff. Don't get me wrong, you know, I do have some emulation devices, but that's because I live in a flat and I don't have the room to own every single game that's going. And I also do have other interests, as you guys know, watching the channel. I love my comics, I love my collectibles, my films. So it's not just gaming, you know. So as a result, yes, to a certain degree, I do have some digital games, but not in the sense that we're talking here, you know. So this is the other reason why I'm a fan of retro, you know. There's a lot of reasons that I've gone over here already. There's 7 reasons there, and I'm sure if I really thought about it, I could probably come up with many more. But let's be honest, I think the one that we all think of when we think of anything retro is the way it made us feel at the time. And so as a result, it's nice to recapture that. And I think everybody, when they get to a certain age, gets to this point where you look back on your life and you get that a certain period of your life that you have that warm, fuzzy feeling about, you know, and you want to recreate that. I think everybody has it, even if it's people having a midlife crisis, you know, where they go out and buy a sports car, for example. I think even them people are guilty of it, because that's kind of what you're doing, really, isn't it? Like, you're probably buying the car that you wanted back in the day and never got. And that's another thing when it comes down to retro gaming, you know. We also go for the bits that we always wanted as a kid, but our parents couldn't afford to get us. You know, so we were like, right, well, now I'm working, I can afford to get that now, you know. So it happens to everyone. We all go through this period. It's just at certain degrees, certain of us go through a higher degree of this, I think. Like, I know for a fact, I know plenty of people in the community that are like me, that are nuts, you know, for this stuff. Maybe some people are probably a little less inclined to buy all the stuff they see like we do. But, you know, if we was all the same, the world would be a pretty boring place, right? Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. And if you have, please leave a like, share, and also subscribe. And until next time, take care, stay safe. Nerdy Geezer out.